Hi, Debbie with DebV here. Today our project is BIM pads. I use a white flannel so that there's no dyes or anything. You want to make sure that it's pre-washed. It will shrink. I also do an iron on, very lightweight. Well, this is a featherweight that's on it today. Now you'll see, yeah, there's a pencil mark because I lay out my board. I lay out my board and draw around it with a pencil. It'll wash out, so I'm not worried about that. And on the first side I went, there's a bunch of room and I turned it over and did it again. Just figure out the best way you're going to get the most out of your fabric. I do both layers at the same time. That way it's set and the right sides are already together. We will sew around the edge, leaving an opening. It's not a very big opening, so it takes a little bit of pushing. I actually use a chopstick to help me get it moved out. And once it's turned, we top stitch it. It really is a nice, simple, easy pattern. I have done extra lines for more stability, and if you just print it out twice and do an extra layer in the center, I made it a little narrower for mine for an extra padding. You can have some extra stability there. There is a free downloadable pattern, and the instructions for cutting is right on the top and what I recommend. 100% cotton, suggested white flannel. Some people use pretty decorative fabrics, and that works for them, and that's great. I happen to have a skin condition, so I try to use as few dyes and such close to intimate parts of my body. But let's get these sewing. With the two layers right sides together, we're going to mark out where we want our hole. I didn't mark it. I was just going to just stop, but you don't want to forget, which I will do, but I cut that part out. And put clips or a pin or something there. We're going to sew along the outside edges. I did a 1/4 inch. If you keep it going slowly while you're doing your curve, it won't be a problem doing the curve. Now we're going to cut up at the corners. We want a little gap in the fabric, and then cut across at the other corners, at the outer corners. I'm going to take pinking shears and cut around the curves, or you could just cut notches out if you don't have pinking shears. This way it'll lay a little flatter. Now we're going to turn it in that little hole, and it ended up being not too hard because my stitches popped. So evening out the fabric to tuck it in took me a little longer than usual, but it wasn't that big a deal. It really wasn't. This is at 4 times speed, so yeah, I wish I could move this fast. But I'm fighting to get those little edges tucked in where the seams pop, because at the corner it popped, and so now I've trimmed it and it wants to stick out. If this happens to you, just put a tiny little touch of glue at that corner after you've top stitched it, just to make sure it won't ravel when it's washed, because if you're like me, these are going to be washed strongly with hot water in a hard agitation to make sure they come clean. So Yeah, a dot of glue in that corner if you have some threads peeking out, or even just automatically do it. Now we're going to top stitch. Now I did it at 1/8 of an inch, well, thereabouts. This is the first time using the narrow AccuFeed foot. I have to admit, I absolutely love it. I did get the zipper attachment, so the next time I do a bag, I will be testing that zipper attachment out. But this moved the fabric through so nicely, and you have a good visual. It has a wide gap, so I was able to see what I was doing. If I use the edge of it, it is right about 1/4 of an inch, so there's no fighting with it. For the 1/8 of an inch, I moved it all the way, the needle all the way over, and it looked like 1/8 of an inch to me, about halfway. I could be wrong. I did not stop and measure it. Now I have the little kit that I purchased, the whole thing. That's what all those loose ones in the middle are mixed in with some clear ones I got in the wrong size. You want 4 of the pokey side, which is pretty smooth on the back, and then 1 of each side. To make sure mine are going to match up, I put both layers together at the same time. I just use an awl. I do have a big press, but it takes longer to get it all set up to do these than to just do it by hand. I just turn it back and forth because my grip isn't very good, and I double and usually triple check because I have put them both on. You want 1 up, 1 down when you're looking at it from the top, say. That way they'll nest together correctly. Okay, here I'm going to show you how I put the extra layer in there. You want to make sure that it's to the back side, the wrong side of 1 layer of that. And then you're going to stitch it down. Now you have to do this to a single layer before putting both layers together. You can go as close to the edge as you want, but try to make sure that you trim that piece down low enough so it won't be in the seams at the curves. Put your right sides together of the 2 layers for the pad, and then you're going to sew it just like you did for the other one. You're going to sew 1/4 inch seams all the way around, leaving an opening for turning out. When we get to the turning out stage, it will look like it was a breeze because this is at 4 times speed. It was a little more difficult than the previous one. It's not impossible though. I was able to do it with my hands being as bad as they are. So I'm sure you can too. You still need to make sure that you either notch or trim with pinking shears around the curve. Very important to get that curve to lay down. Trim out the inner corners and cut close at the outer corners before turning. I have made this design for the embroidery machine also. I had at one point, I was tested out in 8x12, and I made a pattern for this for the 8x12. It is a little different, but it worked quite well. And I do have that. I also have a design for a mini pad for 6x10 embroidery field. If you are interested in those designs, let me know in the comments, and we'll see if we can't get you a copy of them. From this point, it's all just like you saw in the previous one. You will be turning this out and smoothing it out and sewing around the edges at 1/8 of an inch to close that hole, and it also helps give it some body. if you wanted to do a couple of more rows or whatever around the edges, it will help give it a little more body. One thing about flannel is it softens up, which is great for sensitive areas, but in the same sense, it can flop around more so. So I like to add a little stiffener. I want the softness of feel without losing body. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you the next time. Bye-bye.